All right, so today we're really going to get into it. We're doing a deep dive into the psychology of what it takes to get active and stay active.
Yeah,
And we're also going to be covering the super important stuff, the essentials of injury prevention.
right.
And we're going to be drawing all this information from excerpts of the CTS Personal Trainer Certification Manual.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like, the Bible, the playbook for fitness pros.
Yeah, it's like having a secret weapon.
Yeah. So are you ready to unlock some of this, insider knowledge?
Yeah,
I feel like it could really level up your fitness game, whether you're a newbie or if you've been at it for a while and you're kind of hitting a plateau.
especially if you're hitting a plateau or just starting out. It's the best.
Okay, so let's get into this. The manual starts off by talking about something called the Transtheoretical Model.
Oh, yeah.
And it sounds really complicated and fancy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually not. It's basically a roadmap for how people change their behaviors.
Yeah.
How do you finally actually stick to an exercise routine? And it's really interesting because it looks at it not just as a willpower thing,
Oh, absolutely not.
but about understanding the different stages that you go through.
Yeah, the phases.
Yeah.
Because it's not linear. It's very much, there's ups, there's downs, there's, sideways.
Totally. So do you want to walk us through what are those stages?
Yeah, for sure. So the first stage is called precontemplation. And basically, that means you're not even thinking about working out.
Oh,
Like, it's not even on your radar. Maybe you're in denial about needing to be more active. Maybe you've had bad experiences in the past, and it's just like, nope, not for me.
yeah. Some people are just like, I'm good.
I'm good, exactly.
Yeah. So how do you even get someone who's in that stage? How do you get them motivated?
You know, I think the biggest thing is education and really meeting them where they're at. You're not going to be like, hey, let's go run a marathon. You're going to be like, hey, did you know that just walking 10 minutes a day can actually improve your mood? So it's about finding what resonates with them and really planting those seeds of inspiration.
So it's about sparking that initial curiosity,
Yeah.
making them think maybe there's something to this.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So what's the next stage?
So the next stage is called contemplation, which is a very big word.
Yeah. Fancy.
But basically what it means is now they're thinking about it. They're considering it.
Okay. So they're like, okay, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
They're weighing the pros and cons. They're like, okay, I know exercise is good for me, but... And then there's a list of buts.
The buts, yes. But I don't have time but I hate the gym or all those excuses.
Totally.
So how do you help someone overcome those buts and actually take that next step?
I think this stage is all about addressing those concerns head on. If someone says, I don't have time, okay, let's break it down.
Yeah.
Can you find 10 minutes in your day? Can you do something while you're watching TV? So it's really about getting creative, helping them find solutions, and building that motivation. Because they're on the fence, but they're not quite ready to jump over yet.
Why? They need that extra push.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next? What happens after contemplation?
Then we move into preparation. So this is where we start getting specific. It's not just like, oh yeah, I should exercise. Now they're actually like, okay, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So this is where we help them create a personalized plan, set realistic goals.
Okay.
None of that new year, new me, crazy stuff.
Right, because that never works.
Never works.
Yeah.
So it's about setting small, achievable goals and also anticipating those obstacles that might come up. Because let's be real, stuff happens.
Life happens. You get sick, you get busy, your schedule changes.
Exactly. So it's about being prepared for those roadblocks so they don't completely derail you.
Yeah, that's so key because I think that's where a lot of people give up, right? They're like, oh, I missed a couple of workouts, I'm a failure, and then they just quit.
Yeah, the all or nothing mentality.
Right. So how do you help people move past that and stay on track?
So the next stage is action. And this is where we're actually doing it. They're working out, they're sticking to their plan.
Okay, so this is where the magic happens.
Yeah, the magic happens. And this is where support is huge. Having a workout buddy, having a trainer, having someone to cheer you on, to hold you accountable, to celebrate those wins, even the small ones.
I love that because too often we focus on what we're not doing instead of celebrating how far we've come.
Absolutely. And celebrating those small wins is what keeps you motivated, keeps you going.
Totally. So what's the final stage?
The final stage is maintenance. And this is where it becomes a lifestyle. It's not just a temporary thing, it's part of who you are. So this is about refining the program, keeping things interesting, finding new challenges so you don't get bored, and having those strategies to avoid those slip-ups. Because let's be real, Everyone has slip-ups. It's about how you bounce back from them.
Right. It's about long-term sustainability.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got these 5 stages: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And I love that the manual actually gives some really specific tips for each stage.
Yeah, it's super practical.
Yeah. So let's talk about a couple of those.
Yeah.
One that really stood out to me was the concept of setting SMART goals.
Oh, SMART goals are so important.
Yeah, and it's an acronym. So what does SMART stand for?
Okay, so S is for specific. So instead of saying, I want to lose weight, you would say, I want to lose 10 pounds. M is for measurable, so you can track your progress. A is for achievable, so you're not setting yourself up for failure. R is for relevant, so it actually matters to you. It aligns with your values and your goals. And T is for time-bound, so there's a deadline, there's a sense of urgency.
Okay, so an example of a SMART goal would be, I want to lose 10 pounds in the next 3 months by working out 3 times a week and cutting back on sugary drinks.
There you go. That's a SMART goal.
Perfect. It's so much more specific and actionable than just saying, I want to lose weight.
Yeah, and it gives you something to actually work towards.
Totally. Another tool that the manual mentions is using a behavioral contract.
Oh, yeah. I love behavioral contracts.
What's that?
So a behavioral contract is basically a written agreement with yourself,
Okay.
outlining your goals, your plan of attack, and even rewards for hitting those milestones.
Oh, I like the rewards part.
Rewards are important. And here's the kicker. Make it public.
Ooh, okay.
Share it with a friend, a family member, post it on social media. That extra accountability can really make a difference.
Yeah, it's like having your own personal cheerleader, but also someone to kind of keep you in check if you start to slack off.
Exactly. And speaking of support, the manual also dives into how important social support is. Having friends, family, or even a fitness buddy can really make or break your success.
It's true. Having someone to go to the gym with, someone to vent to when you're feeling frustrated, someone to celebrate those wins with, it makes such a difference.
Like having a team.
Yeah. But beyond your inner circle, there are also these things called environmental factors that we have to consider.
Oh yeah, the environment plays a huge role.
Right. So what kind of environmental factors are we talking about?
I mean, think about it. Time constraints. Do you have a crazy busy schedule? Access to facilities? Is there a gym near your house? Or is it a 30-minute drive? Safety. Do you feel safe going for a run in your neighborhood? Convenience. Is it easy to fit exercise into your day, or does it feel like a huge chore?
So it's not just about willpower. It's
Yeah.
about setting yourself up for success
Right.
by creating an environment that supports your goals.
Exactly. Remove those barriers, make it as easy and enjoyable as possible, and you're way more likely to stick with it.
Okay, so we've covered the psychology of getting active, but now let's talk about the other side of the coin, which is injury prevention.
Yeah, staying safe.
Because what's the point of getting all motivated to work out if you're just going to end up sidelined with an injury?
Probably.
And the WITS manual is really big on injury prevention, right?
Oh yeah, there's a whole section on it.
Okay, so tell us, what are some of the key things that they highlight?
Well, first and foremost, they emphasize the importance of having a solid emergency action plan.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means having trained personnel on hand, a clear communication plan in case of an emergency, and easy access to emergency equipment. You know, think AED, first aid kit, all that stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially if you're working out at a gym or a studio.
Right. But even if you're at home, it's good to be prepared.
Okay, so beyond emergencies, what are some of the other things we should be watching out for in terms of injury prevention?
Well, they talk about understanding those everyday factors that can increase your risk of injury.
Okay, like what?
Like how often you exercise, the intensity, the speed of movements, they all play a role. Then you've got environmental factors like heat, humidity, air quality, even your age, your gender, your body structure. They all come into play.
Wow, it's a lot to consider.
It is, but being aware is half the battle.
Right, so the more you understand your body and its limits, the better decisions you'll make.
Exactly. And the manual has a ton of practical strategies for actually reducing that risk.
All right, give us the goods. What are some of those strategies?
Well, first up, pre-activity screening.
What is that?
So this could involve getting medical clearance from your doctor, especially if you have any underlying health conditions. Or it could be as simple as doing a self-assessment of your fitness level and potential risks.
So it's about knowing your baseline before you jump in.
Exactly. Then it's all about designing a program that's right for you, not just following some random workout you found online. This is where working with a qualified fitness professional can be a game changer.
Yeah, because they can help you progress gradually, challenge you safely, adjust things as needed.
Exactly.
It's like having a personalized roadmap instead of just
Mhm.
wandering around aimlessly.
Exactly. And education is a huge part of it, too.
Okay.
The manual talks about empowering people to recognize those early signs of overuse, to understand proper form, and not go from 0 to 60 overnight.
Right. It's about listening to your body,
Exactly.
not ignoring those little whispers that say, hey, slow down.
Yeah, because pain is not a badge of honor.
Right.
It's a signal to stop and adjust.
Totally. And I think that's where a lot of people get into trouble, right? They're so gun-ho, they push themselves too hard, too fast, and then they end up injured.
Exactly. It's finding that sweet spot between challenge and safety.
Right. And knowing the difference.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about injuries. Even with the best prevention, sometimes they happen, right?
They do.
So what are some of the most common injuries that people experience? What are the basics of how to treat them?
So sprains and strains are super common.
Okay. And what's the difference between a sprain and a strain?
So a sprain is when you overstretch or tear a ligament, and a strain is when you do the same thing to a muscle or a tendon.
Yeah.
And the key here is remembering the PRICE protocol.
Price. Okay, what does that stand for?
So P is for protect the injured area,
Okay.
R is for rest, I is for ice, C is for compression, and E is for elevation.
Okay, so price. I'm writing that down. Got it. What about that muscle soreness you feel a day or two after a tough workout?
Ah, yes, that's delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS for short.
DOMS. Okay, so it's not just me. Everyone gets that.
Everyone gets it. It's basically your body saying, hey, we worked hard.
Right. So what's the best way to deal with DOMS?
Honestly, the best remedies are rest, ice, compression, elevation, and maybe some light massage.
So it's all about giving your body the TLC it needs to recover.
Exactly.
Okay, but what if it's more serious than just DOMS? What if it's like a fracture or a deep wound?
Yeah, so the manual touches on those more serious injuries, but the main takeaway is this. If you suspect a fracture or a deep wound, seek professional medical attention immediately.
Yeah, some things are best left to the experts.
Definitely.
Okay, I'm also curious about how the environment impacts our workouts. Because the manual mentions that.
Oh, yeah, the environment can play a huge role.
Right. So what are some of the things that we need to be aware of?
Well, it talks about air quality and pollution, especially if you have asthma, severe allergies, or other respiratory issues.
Okay, yeah.
The key is to avoid training during those peak pollution times. Check the air quality index before you head out for a run.
So it's not just about the temperature outside, it's about the air we're breathing too.
Exactly. And speaking of temperature, exercising in extreme heat can be really dangerous.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So the manual emphasizes the importance of staying hydrated
Okay.
and recognizing those early warning signs of heat-related illness. Things like dizziness, nausea, excessive sweating.
So if you're feeling any of those things, stop, get out of the heat, drink some water.
Exactly.
What about exercising in the cold? Any tips for that?
Definitely layer up and make sure you warm up properly. That's super important to prepare your muscles for the cold.
Okay.
And staying active is key to prevent excessive cooling.
Yeah.
Don't just stand around in freezing temperatures.
Right, keep moving.
Exactly.
So no matter the season, it's about dressing appropriately, being mindful of the conditions, and using common sense.
Absolutely.
Okay. The manual also touches on some special considerations for certain populations,
Yes.
like people with diabetes.
Yes. So it advises them to closely monitor their blood glucose levels before, during, and after exercise,
Okay.
and adjust their food intake or insulin dosage accordingly.
Okay, that's really important information.
Yeah, it's also important for them to know the signs of both low and high blood sugar.
Right, and how to respond appropriately.
Exactly.
Knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
Okay, and one last thing that the manual stresses is the importance of all fitness professionals being certified in CPR and AED.
Oh, yeah. That's crucial.
Right, so in case of an emergency, they can step in and potentially save a life.
Exactly. Be prepared.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive. We talked about the psychology of getting active. We talked about preventing injuries and staying safe in different environments. We even touched on some special considerations for certain health conditions.
It's a lot.
It is. It's a lot. But before we jump into part two, I'm curious to hear what's resonating with you so far. What's standing out?
I think for me, it's the importance of that pre-activity screening
Oh, yeah.
because so many people jump in to exercise without considering their individual needs and risks. And that's just asking for trouble.
Yeah, I totally agree. And for me, it's that emphasis on setting those SMART goals. It seems like such a simple concept, but it can make such a huge difference.
Mm.
What about you? What's something that's really resonating with you?
I'm really fascinated by all the environmental factors that can impact a workout because we often overlook how much our surroundings can actually impact our ability to be consistent and to enjoy the experience, from the air quality to the temperature to even just having access to a gym or a park that you feel comfortable in.
That's such a good point. It's about being mindful of our environment and making
Yeah.
choices that support our fitness goals.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, we're going to be back in part 2 to dive into the legal considerations for fitness professionals.
Oh,
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating.
welcome back to our deep dive.
Right. Part 1 was all about the psychology and safety of fitness, all the feel-good stuff.
Yeah, all the warm and fuzzies.
But now it's time to get real, right? Like, let's face it, there's a serious side to it, too. Things can go wrong.
Exactly. As much as we want to focus on the positive, we also have to be prepared for the not so positive. And that's where the legal side of things comes in. And the Wittrek manual, it actually has a whole chapter dedicated to legal considerations, especially risk management.
So this is like not just about pumping iron, but also protecting yourself and your clients if you're a trainer.
Absolutely. And I like how you said it's like having a lawyer in your gym bag, because honestly, that's kind of what it is.
All right, so take us to law school. What are some of the things we need to know?
Well, the manual starts by saying, look, every physical activity has inherent risks.
Right?
Accidents happen. Sometimes it's nobody's fault. It's just, life.
Yeah, sometimes you trip over your own feet. It's not your trainer's fault.
Exactly.
You're just clumsy.
But then there's negligence.
Right. And that's where it gets a little dicey.
That's when someone is at fault.
Okay?
And this could be the person exercising, the trainer, the facility. There's a lot of moving parts.
So, negligence. Big deal in the fitness world. What makes it different from just a regular accident?
It's about responsibility. Did someone act or fail to act in a way that puts someone else at risk? That's the key question. If a trainer gives unsafe instructions that lead to an injury, that's negligence. Or if a gym has faulty equipment that causes an injury, negligence.
Okay, so there's like a legal definition of negligence. Like, how do you actually prove negligence in a court of law?
Well, there are 4 elements that have to be proven for a negligence claim to succeed. The first one is duty. Basically, the plaintiff, the person who's suing, has to prove that the defendant, the person being sued, had a responsibility to keep them safe.
Okay, like a personal trainer has a duty to provide safe instruction, to make sure the exercises are appropriate for your fitness level, all that stuff.
Exactly. It's about reasonable care.
Okay, so duty, that's the first element. What's next?
Then you have breach of duty, meaning the defendant failed to meet that standard of care. They didn't fulfill their duty. So let's say a trainer gave you an exercise that was way too advanced, you weren't ready for it, and you got hurt. That could be considered a breach of duty.
So they knew better, but they did it anyway.
Yeah. Element number 3, causation.
Causation, okay.
The plaintiff has to prove that the breach of duty directly caused their injury. So it can't just be a coincidence, right? It has to be a clear link between what the defendant did or didn't do and the harm that the plaintiff suffered.
Like your twisted ankle has to be directly related to that unsafe exercise the trainer gave you.
Right. And finally, you have to prove harm and damages.
Harm and damages. Okay, so this is about proving that there was actual harm done.
Right. Not just a little soreness, but something significant. Medical bills, lost wages from being unable to work, physical therapy, things like that.
So all 4 of those things have to be present for a negligence claim to hold up in court.
Exactly. And it can get tricky because there are also defenses against negligence. One of the big ones is primary assumption of risk.
What does that mean?
Basically, it means you knew about the risks involved in the activity, you understood them, and you chose to participate anyway.
So like signing a waiver before you do that crazy boot camp class.
Yes. Waivers and informed consent forms, they're crucial in fitness. They protect everyone involved because it shows that you were informed about the risks, you understood them, and you agreed to participate.
Transparency is key.
Absolutely.
Everyone knows what they're getting into.
But besides just negligence, there are a bunch of other legal things that fitness professionals need to be aware of.
Okay, like what? Hit me with some knowledge.
Big federal laws, you got the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. Can't discriminate against someone because of a disability.
Right, so gyms and fitness studios have to make sure they're accessible to people of all abilities.
Exactly, reasonable accommodations. And then you've got OSHA's bloodborne pathogens standard.
Okay, bloodborne pathogens. That sounds serious.
Yeah, this is about preventing the spread of diseases through contact with blood or other bodily fluids.
Okay, so like if someone gets a cut at the gym You want to make sure that's handled properly so no one else gets infected.
Right, you need procedures in place for cleaning and disinfecting equipment, disposing of contaminated materials, all that good stuff.
So hygiene is important. What else?
Another big one, IPA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. This is all about privacy, protecting people's health information.
So like my trainer can't just go gossiping about my blood pressure to random people.
Exactly.
Okay, good to know.
Confidentiality is key.
Yeah.
And, we've covered negligence, ways to defend against it, these big federal laws. But how do you actually put all this into practice? That's where risk management comes in. The manual is big on this.
Okay, so risk management, this is about being proactive, right? Preventing problems before they happen.
Exactly. It's not just reacting when something goes wrong. It's about having systems in place to minimize risk from the get-go. And they actually lay out a 4-step process for this.
Okay, I'm all about steps. I love a good process. Walk me through it.
Step 1, know the laws and the standards of practice in your field.
Right, so do your homework.
Exactly. Step 2, create risk management strategies based on those laws and standards.
Okay, so you're taking what you learned and coming up with a plan.
Exactly. Step 3, implement those strategies in your business.
So put your plan into action.
Make it happen. And step 4, evaluate.
Evaluate. Okay, so check in, see how things are going.
Right. Are those strategies working? Do you need to tweak them? Are there new risks that have emerged? It's about constantly evaluating and adjusting to make sure you're doing everything you can to minimize risk.
It's like a never-ending process. So the manual gives a lot of practical tips for minimizing legal liability in different areas.
Yeah, it really breaks it down.
So give me some highlights. Like, what are some of the key things they emphasize?
Well, when it comes to personnel, they say hire qualified people, provide proper training and supervision. Make sure you have adequate liability insurance. If you use independent contractors, have clear procedures in place, make sure you have contracts, all that good stuff.
So it's about building a solid team.
Absolutely. People you trust, people who know their stuff, people who are responsible.
Right. What about pre-activity health screening? We talked about that earlier.
So important. They recommend using health history questionnaires, those physical activity readiness questionnaires, things like that, to flag any potential risks early on.
So it's like making sure people are ready for what they're about to do.
Yeah, and that their program is tailored to their needs and limitations. If someone has a heart condition, they shouldn't be doing the same workout as a 20-year-old marathon runner.
Right, makes sense.
And then fitness testing, exercise prescription, have to be done safely and effectively. They recommend having clear guidelines for anyone conducting those tests, especially for people with underlying health conditions. Know your limits. Know when to refer someone to a specialist.
Stay in your lane.
Exactly. Instruction and supervision during workouts, super important. They recommend having a thorough orientation for new clients. Make sure they know how to use the equipment, explain the facility rules, the emergency procedures, all of that. And of course, having enough staff on hand to supervise everyone and make sure everyone's staying safe.
Right, so it's about creating a safe environment where people feel comfortable asking questions.
Yeah, and getting the help that they need.
What about the equipment itself? That seems like a big one.
Huge. Make sure it's installed properly, maintained regularly, have a system for monitoring who can access the facility, are there age restrictions, things like that. And of course, regular safety inspections, checking for wear and tear, making sure everything's in good working order.
So basically, you want to make sure your gym is a safe space.
Yeah.
Literally.
Exactly.
What about those emergency action plans, the EAPs? Those are like non-negotiables, right?
Absolutely. They recommend having a written plan, one that's comprehensive, covers all kinds of emergencies, from those little minor injuries all the way up to cardiac events. And of course, make sure your staff is trained in CPR and AED.
Right. Be prepared for anything.
And the last thing they emphasize is record keeping and documentation.
Documentation, oh yeah, super important.
Keep those records, incident reports, client progress notes, equipment, maintenance logs, everything.
So it's not just about doing the work, it's about documenting it.
It protects you, shows that you acted responsibly, you followed procedures.
Wow, okay, this is way more than I ever thought about.
Right, it's a whole other world.
It's like the legal side of fitness is a world in itself. What stands out to you from all this legal stuff? Like, what's the biggest takeaway?
For me, it's the informed consent piece. Those waivers, they might seem like a formality, but they're so important. They really protect both the client and the professional.
Okay, and what about you? What really stands out to you? It's that risk management piece.
Yeah.
Being proactive, not just reactive.
I love that. A culture of safety.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, you ready for some real-world application of all this?
Oh, yeah. Bring on the case studies. All right, welcome back to our deep dive.
So in parts 1 and 2, we covered a lot of ground, the psychology of how to get active and how to stay injury-free.
Hmm.
And we even went to law school for a bit, talking about all the legal stuff that comes with the fitness world.
Right. It's more complicated than people think.
But now it's time to bring it all together and see how all these concepts play out in the real world, right?
Yes, exactly.
Great case studies.
Case studies are so helpful. That's like those aha moments, you know?
Totally. So let's start with a case study that shows us why that transtheoretical model that we talked about is so important. Okay, so imagine you're a trainer and you're working with Sarah. And Sarah, she knows she needs to exercise more. She
Right.
really does. But she just can't seem to get started. She's thinking about it. She's in that contemplation stage, but she's not quite committed.
Okay, so she's on the fence.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a lot of people, you know?
Yeah, it's a very common stage. So how do you help Sarah actually move forward? That's where understanding the transtheoretical model is so key.
Right, because if you don't understand where she's at, you're going to approach her in the wrong way.
Exactly. So the first thing is you wouldn't just throw a bunch of workout plans at her and say, all right, here you go, get to work.
Right, because she's not ready for that.
She's not ready. You have to meet her where she's at.
Okay, so what does that look like? What do you do?
Well, you start by understanding her barriers. Why is she hesitant? What are her concerns? What's holding her back?
So you're kind of playing detective a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. And then you try to tap into what actually motivates her. Maybe Sarah loves to dance or she enjoys hiking, but she hates going to the gym. So instead of trying to force her into a setting that makes her uncomfortable, you try to find ways to incorporate those activities that she enjoys.
Right, so you're meeting her where she's at, literally and figuratively.
Exactly. Make it fun. Make it appealing. Make it something that she's actually going to want to do.
And I bet highlighting those benefits that really resonate with her would be helpful too, right? Like if she's really stressed out, you can talk about how exercise is a great stress reliever.
Absolutely. You want to tailor your approach to her individual needs and goals. And then as she starts to move closer to that preparation stage, you can start to help her create a more personalized plan. You can talk about setting those SMART goals.
Okay, yeah. And maybe even find her a workout buddy so she has some support.
Yeah, social support is huge.
Right. Okay, that's a great example. Now let's talk about injury prevention. Do you have a case study that illustrates why that's so crucial?
Okay, let's say you're working with John.
Okay, John.
John is super motivated. He wants to get back in shape after being inactive for a while.
Okay.
But he's got that go big or go home mentality,
Oh, yeah.
He's always pushing himself to the limit, and he's not really listening to his body.
I see where this is going. That's how people get injured.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
So how do you prevent John from getting sidelined by an injury?
Well, this is where that concept of gradual progression is so important.
Okay, gradual progression. So tell us about that.
You wouldn't start John off with heavy weights and intense cardio right out of the gate.
Right.
You'd start him off with more basic movements, lighter weights, shorter durations, and then you'd gradually increase the intensity and complexity over time as his body adapts.
So it's like that saying, you have to crawl before you can walk, walk before you can run.
Exactly. And of course, you'd make sure he's using proper form for each exercise.
Yeah, that's key.
And you'd really emphasize that pain is not a badge of honor.
Right. It's a signal to stop and adjust.
Exactly. And I think having regular check-ins would be really important too.
Yeah, just to see how he's feeling, make any necessary adjustments to the program.
Right, keep him on track, keep him safe. It's about finding that balance between challenge and safety.
Right, because you want to push him, but you don't want to push him too far.
Exactly.
Okay, those are some great examples. Now for our last case study, let's bring in the legal side of things. Do you have a scenario that really highlights those legal considerations that we talked about in part 2?
Okay, picture this. Maria is at the gym, she's working out, and she slips on a wet floor. She twists her ankle. It's a classic gym injury right now.
Yeah, I've been there.
So the question becomes, was there negligence involved?
Okay, so we have to figure out who's at fault. Was it the gym's fault for not marking the wet floor? Or was it Maria's fault for not paying attention?
Exactly. And here's where documentation becomes so important. Did the gym have a system in place for dealing with spills? Did they have warning signs up? Do they have a record of regular safety inspections? If they do, that helps to show that they took reasonable precautions to prevent accidents.
Okay, but if they didn't do any of those things, then they could be in trouble, right?
Potentially, yeah. But on the flip side, if Maria signed a waiver when she joined the gym, acknowledging the inherent risks of working out, that could limit the gym's liability.
Right, so those waivers and informed consent forms are so important.